Welcome to the Brown Girl Rising podcast. I'm your host, Urvashi, and I'm so happy to have you here. We are here to celebrate you and incredible, inspirational women of color from around the world. Women who are breaking down cultural barriers, who are smashing through glass ceilings, and women who have experienced trauma and challenges and risen from these challenges. I'm so excited, so let's dive in. Hi guys, welcome to the Brown Girl Rising podcast. Today I have a really special guest with me. It is Dr. Neeta Bushan. She is amazing, a multifaceted lady, an entrepreneur, a CEO, a two-time author of Emotional Grit, and That Sucked Now What? The host of the Brave Table, a leader, a performance coach, a speaker, a change maker, and a mother to two gorgeous kids. Neeta helps people bounce back and fly forward after a fall or trauma. And this came from her experiencing multiple traumas herself through childhood and into adulthood. She's also the reason this podcast exists today. Before actually meeting Neeta at the Highest Self Weekender, I learned from her in DCI, and she was one of my coaches. And I was completely inspired and blown away that I actually had the cheek to reach out to her and ask her to be on my podcast one day when I launched it. And her response was, consider it done, now go and start. So she gave me the push, and within a week there was a podcast, there was a trailer, and now today we're on episode 20. So thank you, Neeta, for being the encouraging, open and warm human that you are, and for joining me on today's podcast, Brown Girl Rising. So how are you?
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for this. Wow. I'm like, okay, after one conversation, you actually, you did it. So here we are.
Here we are. So thank you for that. But so look, this is about you today, and I want to introduce you to the people that I know. So I want to know, first of all, what does it mean to you to be unlimited?
So when I think of unlimited, I think of unapologetic. I think of breaking barriers and standing in your own power, in your own truth, kind of cutting ties to our cultural karmas, our cultural obligations, pissing more people off at the expense of many times putting yourself first. And I think that allows us to fly. And I talk a lot about flying forward, and being unlimited allows you to fly forward, upward, backwards, flip over, be that unicorn in your life, and also create those ripple effects for those who are probably listening today. So I'm really thank you for that question.
I love that. I love that. Now, you mentioned breaking down cultural barriers, and you've done a lot of that in your life. So can you just do a little recap? Obviously, I know your story, but could you do a little recap of how you became the woman you are today, and what you went through, and the barriers that you had to kind of break, or the glass ceilings you had to crash through?
Ooh, wow.
Oh,
Okay.
that's a half an hour conversation, isn't it?
Well, I'll start where most people, I think, maybe are at potentially in their own lives. I think for me, one of my biggest dreams was, to get married. And, as they say, get married before 30, get married before 30, find somebody before 25, or have your kids before 30, all of those things. That was like fully etched in my upbringing. My dad was Punjabi, my mom was Filipino. And so a lot of the cultural obligations to do, to achieve, to perform, and to, serve others. And some are listening, they're like, okay, and what's wrong with that? And I think there's this at the expense of my own dreams, my own desires, didn't even know who I was. And so a lot of times chasing all of these accolades for like the external validation from my dad, from relatives, etc. The thing for me is that I got into very toxic and codependent relationships. I now have a podcast as well, and it's Top 100 in mental health and, emotional health relationships, called The Brave Table. And it's really all around helping us rewire and unwire what we've been taught.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know any of those things. I don't think a lot of us know, right? Because we have the
Right.
Bollywood movies and the Bollywood, all of that. And so for me, I wanted to recreate a family that I'd lost because by the age of 19 and between 10 and 19, I would not only be a caretaker to my mom, but then I would see her go through a 6-year battle with breast cancer. And then
Mm.
I would lose my brother to an asthma attack a year
Oh,
after my
wow.
mom died. And then at 18, my dad was diagnosed with 9 months to live with his lung cancer. So before
Gosh.
19, I'm an orphan. And I'm also a caretaker to my youngest brother who was almost 14.
Yeah.
So I rushed into my 20s, having this idea of what love was. And in my life, love was I'm not letting any relationship go because I was so afraid to be alone. My core wound was abandonment. And so while I excelled in school and distraction and all of these mechanisms of success was in the back of my mind because of how I was raised,
Mm.
I didn't really know myself. And I yes, excelled in one way. I went to dental school, had a practice, had a 7-figure practice before I was 30,
Wow.
all of the things, the bells and the whistles and the trappings of success. I found myself on December 31st, 2011, just trapped. And December 31st is New Year's Eve. And so when everyone is celebrating what they're going to be doing in their life and what the next year holds, I was literally crouched down on fetal position in the master bedroom of my home that I thought I had made it. But I was so afraid of my life, so afraid if this person that I was now married to was going to hit me again.
Yeah.
I was so afraid of what the world would think, knowing that this broken girl, and I say this in quotes, broken because I thought I was broken, but
Mm.
she had to break in order to let
Mm.
people in. And that
Yeah.
was the first time I would allow not only friends, family members, aunts, uncles, people that I was so respectful to say, I need help and I can't
Mm.
do this on my own. And that then charted the next 7 years and the next 7 years of coming back to myself,
Yeah.
unapologetically being able to begin the process of healing and not just traditional therapy, because I went to therapy when I was in my teens. This was different. It was, stepping into all different kinds, going to the ashrams my dad went to, visiting all the temples, that our lineage, our cultures grew up
Yeah.
at. I took it so for granted,
Yeah.
and spending time with different shamans in different cultures, different places all over the world, from Peru to Ecuador to Bali to Vietnam to, all over the world,
Wow.
to finally arrive at, peace. And I
Mm.
think that peace, and it's the inner peace, and the inner peace of you already know, and the inner peace of following my dharma, and that was unshackling and unlearning all of the things and cutting those karmic cords, that were those obligations, those cultural karmas,
Yeah.
to really arrive at where I am today, writing books around emotional health, and around emotional resilience, and doing things with people that I really love, which
Mm.
is where you come into the fold. We started Dharma Coaching
Yeah.
Institute as a result of, our karmic paths, my co-founder and I, Sahara, because we knew that women looking like us, being like us, didn't really exist, that we were the brown sheep, the rainbow
Yeah.
sheep, to do something completely different. And people still ask me today, hey, do you still have your dental license? What happened? And I sold the company.
Yeah.
I kind of relieved all of that. So you mean to say you don't practice? Nope, I don't. Do you miss it? No, I don't. So anyone listening to this thinking that they are in between relationships or maybe friendships or maybe stuck in their lives, maybe there's something for you to check in with. What is that
Mm.
next evolution of where you're going?
I love that. Thank you so much for that. And you're right with the whole relationship thing. Like I'm in between, I wouldn't say in between. I've ended a relationship
Mhm.
and I keep thinking, is it what I want to go? I keep seeing it with rose tinted glasses, like it was great, but it wasn't always great. And so me trying to go back there or have a conversation or try and pull him back into my life is not gonna favor me going forward at all. Um, you speak in your book about after the divorce, you kind of just uprooted your life and came to Europe and thought that Europe would be this incredible start for you. But actually, you still had some of those doubts and fears and kind of people looking at you, oh, you're orphaned, oh, you're divorced. Like, can you just kind of explain how that trip made you as well? Like, what was it about that trip that
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so this is going to date me a little bit, but the first time I went to Europe was a year after my dad died. And it was literally finding the first study abroad, whatever it was to get me out of my suck and out of my circumstance of this has been literally for all of my teen years. I didn't know anything other than grief. I didn't know anything other than struggle. I didn't know anything other than, ooh, I can have a crush on this person and this person. That would distract me from like going to see my parents, in dying in hospital settings. And that's as kind of real as it got.
yeah,
Um, and so there was something in my soul that was just like, I don't care about anything, anyone. I had my aunts and my grandmother, they were just like, what are you doing? I'm like, yep, it's for school. I'm going for school. Got into all of the things and landed in Rome. And that summer changed my life. I have such a deep soul connection with Roma, with Italy. I've been back now, almost annually for the last,
oh wow,
20 years. Um, you know, Annually I say or every other year, but I've made it a point to visit all the, different spots. And in that particular trip, there's a concept that I talk about in the book called your bounce factor. And your
yeah,
bounce factor is literally there's 4 pillars of building what I like to call your resiliency. And not just resiliency of mental toughness of what everyone talks about on those memes or when you look at a motivational video. I'm talking about resiliency as in your ability to also feel soft, your ability to
mm,
also feel vulnerable to share. That summer, I was with so many other students from around the globe. And that was the first time I would be away from trauma. I would be
mm,
away from setbacks, challenges that I would be, even though it was like, 90 degrees and humid, no AC in our dorms. I'm like living life to the fullest. And I'm like, this is what joy is like. Oh my goodness, this is what being unlimited is like
yeah,
to actually not have that weight or the mental weight a lot of times or the emotional weight that we
mm,
carry so often, and then I could recreate who I was, because way back in Chicago I was the girl that lost her family before she was 19. And
yeah,
oh, we have to pity her. Oh god, can you believe that? Can you believe she would go? And here I could choose to share what I felt like sharing,
mm,
where and when. I could choose what parts of my story could come along,
yeah,
and I could be um I could be so solid and so present in who I was going to share it with, because many
yeah,
times we don't want to share it with everyone, and that's okay. And many times you find your soul people and you're like, all right, we're going to go deeper. And I found the delineation that there are different types of people. Not everyone deserves to hear your
no,
story.
they really don't.
And that's and that's okay, right? But where I grew up, everyone knew everything. And so I didn't know how to not share all of that until you walked into and you change what I like to call your current environment. That's the
Mm,
second pillar of your bounce factor. The first part is making peace with the past, making peace with your upbringing, making peace that I lost 3 members of my family and I couldn't do a damn thing about it. I was
no,
not in control.
yeah,
As much as I tried to, as much as I tried to all of the things. And and with the second, pillar with your current environment, this also shifts into, the relationships that you have, the friendships that you have. are you actually putting yourself out there? I didn't know a single soul in Italy at 20. And I still have friends to this day that they're in different parts of the world, and those friendships from one summer still carried on. And
That's
it's just so
fantastic.
beautiful and magical. And I think that, we get to choose our soul family,
Mm,
in those ways. And, you've obviously experienced that at
yes.
our highest self weekend. And I think in other touch points, the experiences that we have. And for me, I dove heavily into plant medicine healing, psychedelics, you know, different like ecstatic dance, all different kinds of dance.
Mm,
That's not just your performative
yeah.
dance that we grew up with doing, but just in your own essence, in your own flow. One of the things that I ended up doing before I met, this was a year before I met my now husband, was I married myself in Bali, in the
Oh,
southern tip
wow.
of Bali. I married myself in Uluwatu. And this was a homage, an homage to myself of what are we willing to do where this can be a reminder for you that you are going to put yourself first. And now it may sound cliche, it might sound, but I think that so often as women, especially coming from these backgrounds, it took me a really long time to really believe, to
Yeah.
receive love from
Mm.
friends, other people, strangers, that I'm like, oh, this is not like an agenda here, but to actually open arms and say, okay, I receive this. I receive this compliment. I receive the
Mm.
help that you're going to give me, but also pouring into myself what I was searching for in other people,
Yeah.
including men. And so this was my vow to myself that I was always going to fill myself up first, my cup first. And a year later, I get,
Ajit came along.
he was always in the surface
Yeah.
in different paths and different community gatherings, and we were always intersecting each other. And then we finally got together in 2016.
I love that. I feel like I need to go back. I mean, I've only just returned from Bali, so I feel like I need to go back to Uluwatu and marry myself now.
There you go. I mean, the southern tip facing, I think it's the Indian Ocean.
Yeah, it is
Um,
amazing. So I want to talk about your book. That sucked. Now what? So what was it that made you write this book, and why do you feel it's needed today?
oh wow, yeah. So I think that, for me, there's a chapter in my book. It's in the afterword around where, you finally got the man of your dreams, and you're finally saying yes to motherhood. And there was a time after my divorce I didn't want to have kids, and I didn't even think I wanted to get married again. And even when Ajit and I said that we were going to get together, it was having a union, because I couldn't even utter the words marriage out of my mouth. And I think because, many times marriage feels like a forever sacrament, or, this like you're locked in a cage or
Mm,
prison. I've heard so many different iterations, especially if somebody's had a bad breakup or they just went through it. They're like, nope, it's not for me. And I think I wanted to redefine what marriage meant in so many ways. And so we
mm.
actually had different unions around the world, and we still call them unions.
Oh, wow.
Um, but I think that, when I entered motherhood, that was a different layer of identity. And it was a different layer of identity because I was a very sovereign woman. I was so independent. And I'm like, okay, I'm merging with this other amazing, huge force in the world. And we both have our desires, our livelihood. And how are we going to now, intermesh our worlds together? And that too, start a family.
Mm,
And so there was a lot of like identity pieces that came up. And of course, a lot of things that I thought I'd done a lot of my healing. And of course, when you meet the right person, a lot more of your triggers, your own things kind of come up to the surface. Well, a lot of unresolved anger and unresolved grief of just me and postpartum depression. There's this thing called postpartum rage that came up. And this is all under the umbrella of postpartum depression,
yeah.
where you just feel like you are out of control in your
Mm,
emotions, in And many times this happens to type A women, women who are very independent and strong, and they're not used to receiving
Yeah.
support. They're not used to receiving help. And I just retracted all the way into, you were at day 2, inner teenager. And I retracted all the way into my inner teenage years. Well, during my teenage years, I had the most amount of trauma. I had
Yeah.
lost 3 members of my family. And I remember when my dad got the diagnosis of stage 4 lung cancer. I remember looking at the doctors and I'm like in disbelief. And I'm like, how, I was so angry. I was so mad. I'm like, how could you tell me this? And I had to keep it together. And
Mm.
I wanted to curse them out, not that it was their fault, but I was just like, I just was so angry. Like, why me? Why is this happening? And those feelings resurfaced and those memories even resurfaced when I had my son. Like, I was so angry. I'm like, why are you helping me? I was like yelling at my mother-in-law. Probably not the thing to do, to yell at your Indian mother-in-law.
No.
And just so many things. And my husband's just like, are we okay? Is this supposed to happen? Where I really needed to reconcile the duality that I just gave birth to this beautiful, amazing little human that's ours. But why am I feeling so resistant that I want to do everything and I want to, make sure that, he's okay and like snapping at everyone. And I had to reconcile those emotions, all of that grief and all of the suppression that I never really was allowed to emote. Because when I was growing up, everyone was like, nope, Neeta, you're strong.
Yeah.
You're resilient. You you're okay. You're okay. You don't need to cry. They're with you. They're with you. And it was like, imagine just going through it day after day. And you're like, I'm going to hold it together because everyone told me
Mm.
to do so. And so then fast forward when I'm like in the most vulnerable state, and needing support because you have to mother the mother in the 40 days,
Yes.
in the
Yeah.
Ayurvedic traditions where they mother you. And I was like, no.
Get
And
away.
oh, it was even worse. It was like it was like no way. And I had to be like, why am I acting this way? And then I started to do a lot of inner child work, a lot of reparenting myself and seeing my son. And then 2 years later, we had my daughter. Same thing. My postpartum wasn't as long yet. This medicine, they were my medicine, and they were the
Mm.
medicine to teach that, what, how to embrace the joy and chaos and find magic in the mess. And I realized all of the layers in my story, the various different chapters and the various different students that I had mentored or coached over the years all brought a little bit of like, that sucked. Now what? And what was
Mm.
the now what going to look like
Yeah.
in motherhood? Whereas my now what after my breakup, after my relationship, after friendship breakups was so different. And this book was a culmination of all of those chapters. Doesn't matter if you're in motherhood, doesn't matter if you're not in motherhood, doesn't matter if you're single now. It's for everyone who has gone through some sucky moments. And I have
Yeah.
2 specific frameworks that
Yeah.
really support redefining resiliency in your life.
Mm.
That's not just go, 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 let's get over it tough, because I was like that for pretty much most of my early life, to now reframe it and say, okay, well, what is that grief telling me? Or what is that anger telling me? Or what's that jealousy showing me
Mm.
that, I'm not allowing myself to fully fly in my own
Yeah.
ways? Um, and so, and that's how Now What was born.
Yeah. Amazing. So it sounds like when you were younger and before all this happened, you were very much in your masculine. And in that sect now what, there's a lot of feminine energy that comes through, even with the embodiment practice and stuff. So I do want to talk about the fly forward framework in a second, but I want to ask you first, like, if someone finds themselves in a mess, right? And they're searching for the magic in the mess, like, what would you say is the most important thing that they do in that moment?
Oh, to even just embrace it, to embrace it. It's so easy to numb, distract, avoid. We want to avoid ourselves of the pain. So we call our
Mm.
friends, right? So we pick up our phone. We start
Mm.
scrolling. We get that dopamine hit.
Yep.
We search for any sort of dopamine, whether it's a book, magazine, retail therapy, you know, whatever, weed, smoking up, the next thing, the next course, the next thing, right? To occupy ourselves, to occupy this, our heart, to
Mm.
occupy our bodies. And when can we actually sit in the suck and allowing ourselves, and you know this, Urvashi, to sit in the suck for 60 to 90 seconds, to actually allow the intensity of the emotions to fully envelop your body. And like,
Mm.
you're probably like, fuck me, I can't do that. Well, maybe you can. Maybe you can
Yeah.
set your timer for 60 seconds. You know, scientists say it takes 60 seconds, 60 to 90 seconds to fully feel an emotion and
Yeah.
to allow that to come up. You might shed some tears, but guess what? Tears actually shed cortisol. Cortisol is that stress hormone. Can we allow ourselves to just be in the suck for 60 to 90 seconds? And it's a muscle, it's a practice. It's like meditating. You're not going to be good at it in the beginning.
Oh
You're
God,
going to
no.
say, oh my God, this is so painful. This is so painful. This is so painful. Why am I doing this? I want to just like get on IG right now and just distract myself with like cat videos. But to allow yourself to sit in the suck, that's number one. Two, to embrace what happened, because many times we're just suppressing it and we're suppressing it in our
Mm.
mind. We're like, nope, it's not so bad. It's not so bad. Or we're ruminating. How could they do this to me? How could they say this? And they never, it never went through. I never got that promotion. I never got the thing. I never got the gig. They said that they were going to give me a second chance, whatever.
Yeah.
We start ruminating instead of just saying, wow, that really hurt. I feel really hurt. I feel really slighted. I feel really betrayed right now. To say it out loud, to actually acknowledge the
Mm.
feeling and the emotion, because what that means is, well, we're releasing it. It's like a pressure valve, the pressure cookers that all of our moms have.
Yep.
We're releasing all that pressure. And then we say, oh, okay, maybe it wasn't that bad, or wow, I feel so much lighter because I was just able to say it out loud and not keep it bottled up
Mm.
inside where you're
Yeah.
already going to burst.
Yeah.
Those are initially the two things. There's kind of a 5-step process in the book, how to embrace the sucky moments as they come up in your day. And I'll just give you the third step. There's more, but, that third step is just to, continue to allow. You might not be in the presence of forgiving anybody or anything, or not even yourself. You might not even want to see the silver lining.
Yeah.
You might just want to be in the fullness of
Yes.
the grief, the anger, the sadness, and allow it. Allow it. Sometimes it's more than the 60 to 90 seconds. So,
Oh, I know. I've been there, and actually, it's not like I love being in that space, but actually sometimes I actually want to just feel those emotions. There's been times in my life where I've spoken to somebody and gone, this is how I feel. And they're like, yeah, but you have a great life, you have your own apartment, you have a great car, you have this. I'm like, yeah, but that's not what this is about. I just need to feel. And that's what I loved about the Highest Self weekend, and I can't wait for the next one, that we actually got to feel. I cried, I laughed, I screamed, like I shook my body. It was just magical, the entire experience.
well, and remember you said to me, you're like, I don't know if I'm gonna like this because I'm too British, and I don't know if this is gonna be an American thing. And I'm like, okay. And then day 3,
Yeah.
what did you say?
I said I loved every second. Honestly, when I walked in, I was like, oh my God, I'm like one of 3 British people here. And I'm like, this is so American. Like I'm quite a loud Brit, and I got there and I felt like a very reserved Brit. But then in day 3, I was like, here I am, I'm open.
Take me as I am. Oh, I love it. I just loved seeing your transformation. It was
It was
amazing.
incredible. So with regards to the fly forward framework, was it 5 steps? 4 steps.
Yeah.
5 steps. Yeah.
Yes, 5 steps.
Yes.
Yes.
And can you just take us through kind of like just quickly, obviously, people will read this book, they have to read this book, it's incredible, but just how to like go from feeling stuck to going, right, I'm there, I'm going for it.
Oh, yeah. So the first stage of flying forward is the fall,
Mm.
is recognizing, okay, all right, this happened. I got the diagnosis. I got laid off. I found out this person was cheating on me. I found out that, maybe I don't see a life with this person at all.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you are on the precipice of making the change.
Mm,
And, then we get into the ignition and the ignition stage. Now, this is all about, all right, I got to make a decision. Am I going to break up with this person, or are we going to go see a therapist? Am I going to get the support that I need? Am I going to
mm,
hire a coach? Am I going to find a second opinion for this thing? And, it's kind of like that fire under your belly. What you did before is not working, where I have to make a different decision. I have to do something else. And I honestly don't know what that something else is, but I'm willing to try, because everything that I've tried in the past has got me kind of in the same soup in the same situation. And so
yeah.
you're willing to try something new. And people ask me, well, Neeta, what if you're not willing to? Then I'm like, well, you're not going to be on this fly forward path. You're going to just still be in that same soup of a fall and an ignition, fall and an ignition. And many times in life, you're there will be, the universe will give you those tests and
Mm,
tribulations and trials. And it's up to you to actually say, okay, am I going to take this ignition this next time? Am I going to keep going? This person showed me again that they're not that right person for me, or they're not the right friend for me. Am I going to still continue to be their friend, or do I have to have a difficult conversation?
mm,
And so then we get into the rising stage. Now, rising, magnifying, and thriving. These are the three layers, I like to say, because in rising, we are actually starting to literally be the phoenix from the ashes
yes.
and rise up into, we're wobbly like a toddler walking for the first time. We are uncertain, but we're also bracing the uncertainty because we know we don't have all the answers. And when you're operating out of curiosity, you're kind of like, oh, okay, well, maybe I can go to Europe. Maybe I can go sit with some shamans. Maybe I can go do this like highest self weekend retreat for 3 days. And I don't know anybody there. I don't know what to expect. But all right, I'm going to say yes to it. And then we get into magnifying. Then we're like,
Mm.
ooh, I want to do more of this. Like, where can I go to another one of these? Or can I create something in my own hometown? Because we're
Which I've done, by the
magnifying.
way. So excited.
I see, I love it. You're magnifying right now. And the thing is we're also being really clear with our boundaries. We're also gaining internal confidence of who we are, and we're walking towards our path of our dharma. And really our dharma is our soul's highest expression of who we are calling ourselves to be in this next evolution of who we are. And that magnifying is also like, okay, well, maybe I will say yes to this date. I'm going to be unattached to the outcome, because
Mm,
you're so focused on just the present. You're not focused on like the future or whatever. You're focused on magnifying more of what you've already cultivated. And then in thriving, well, thriving is just you're flourishing. It
yeah.
doesn't mean that you're never going to go through a suck. It doesn't mean you're never going to have a fall again, because, basically it's cyclical,
It
but
is.
thriving just means you're checking in and you have something, what I call a POC, a personal observation check-in. And this is, how are you actually feeling? How are you feeling when you're with this person? Are they lighting you up, or are they depleting your energy? Do they give you life, or do they take from you? And so you're noticing, and you're also embedding what I like to call your RSA, your radical self-awareness of what is in alignment with you and what's no
Mm,
longer in alignment with you at that stage, knowing that, all right, with this next fall, I have all the tools. I have
yeah.
all the tools that are going to equip me so I can actually do the work, and I can see what my triggers are. I can see my patterns of how I've behaved in the past, so that I can start working on those. So it's
Yeah.
an ever evolving
Mm.
framework.
Yeah. And if you guys want to dive deeper, I do highly recommend getting that sucked now what. And also the conversation cards are amazing. I
Oh,
used them on
yeah.
a train with some colleagues before I left my job. By the way, I've left my job. Yeah, yeah,
Congratulations. I have mine
go
too.
snap. And I found out stuff about my colleagues that I would never have found out before. And it was so deep. It was amazing. So
So
that's
amazing.
incredible. So Neeta, I know you have to go soon, but can you tell us if somebody wants to buy the book, follow you, listen to the podcast, how do they find you and come into your world?
Oh my goodness. Well, get the book at thatsuckednowwhat.com. You can just go there and basically it'll take you to my website, and the website's neetabushan.com. That's where you'll see podcasts, the Brave Table. You'll see all the ways that you can get into mastering your emotions, feeling your emotions, and all of the things.
Yeah,
So, Urvashi,
amazing.
thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I think next time I'm going to join you. Was it Lithuania you went to or something like that for
Oh,
that?
we were in
For
Estonia.
Estonia. That's it. I will definitely be there next time for the Epic
Oh,
coaching.
you'll love it. You will love it. It'll be so
Thank
much
you
fun.
so much, Nita. Thank you guys, and we will see you on the next podcast.